Most guides for Castile on YouTube follow roughly the same path, including mine, unfortunately. But now I know what I was doing wrong. The standard strategy is about 250 gold income. After 1400, and basically everyone thinks that's a pretty good result. But it isn't. You only need to change a few things in Castile's opening strategy to double that income. In this video, I'll show you in 7 steps not only how to quickly unite Iberia, but also how to make it the richest country in Europe. Welcome, Imperialist Lucas here. Right at step 1, before I unpause the game, I'll be setting many things differently. Forts. I'm keeping literally 5 forts, no more, but ultimately I'll delete almost all of them. One of them, the one located in Galicia, I transfer under the control of a newly released vassal. Or more precisely, my fiefdom. Galicia will provide decent income from the start, but more importantly, it will be able to field an additional 10,000 levies early in the game. I remove the infantry from the army, it's useless for now. However, I keep the cavalry and I make the ruler the admiral of my fleet. I do this for 2 reasons. After the monthly tick, it will increase the crown, meaning I'll have more authority and be able to collect taxes without penalties. But when the current ruler is an admiral, it immediately pushes the country toward naval values. And when he later gains the admiral trait after fighting his first battle, he'll do it even more effectively. Yes, if you wanted to develop land values instead, you just do the opposite. Capital. It stays where it is, but only for the next 20 years. I'll move it around the time of the plague. Indeed, I have to admit, one of my viewers was right. The one whose nickname I can't pronounce on the English channel, who pointed this out to me. I'll also optimize the research queue. First, I research additional burghers, because I have a lot of cities and towns. I'll want to introduce institutions quickly, so that's my second research. Then increase diplomatic influence, and after that we'll see. Advisors. The first one, as usual, improves values toward communalism, and the second will focus on strengthening legitimacy. Privileges. Yes, I'm about to spend a lot of legitimacy points here, because I'll grant quite a few privileges to the estates. First of all privileges in every estate that increase communalism values. This way I'll be able to push communalism up to 80%. And now this might shock you, but privileges that increase free subjects, but not because serfdom is bad or worse than free subjects. No, I still believe it is actually better. However, the whole trick of building a wealthy country is that you need to push either serfdom or free subjects very quickly. And unfortunately, Castile already has a lot of privileges granted to the peasantry that push the country toward free subjects. At some point in this video, I'll show a comparison of playing with both values. Because I spent a few days testing it, I hope you'll reward my effort with a like. But I won't overdo these privileges for the peasants. 2 are enough at the start. The remaining privileges I'll grant over time. Because right now for the burghers, I need to grant those 2 privileges, and for the nobility, also 2 privileges, so that a state doesn't rebel immediately. And that's it for now, because I'm running out of legitimacy. Rivals. You need to wait a moment with those. Children's education. Honestly, I'm not going to spend money on that, because I intend to spend it all on promotions on ENEBA. Information about the latest deals is in the description of this video. For them to work, you need to use my link. I recommend the channel's partner, Lucas. But seriously, we all know how Pedro will end up, so I'll only invest in his basic education. I set all taxes to automatic, I increase court spending, decrease army spending, and reduce fort maintenance. I reduce diplomacy expenses practically to a minimum. I set trade to automatic. And now, with everything set up, I'm ready to unpause and move on to the next stage, where I'll show you how to build your starting economy. I start by building a library and a scriptorium in the capital. And for now, that's it. While these first 2 buildings are under construction, I check who sets me as a rival, especially what Navarre will do. And in basically every game of mine, Navarre is hostile toward me. I check who else Aragon has as a rival, and it has France, great! This happens very often. So now I choose Navarre as my rival, and the Kingdom of Aragon as well. I immediately build a spy network in Navarre and begin improving relations with France. Now I go back to building, and I have to admit I spend money very carefully over the next 2 years, because I am counting on a certain event. And this is Lucas from the future. Generally, it would have been enough to keep around 550 gold. This event is related to the Castilian ruler's trait, specifically the architectural visionary. The second location I develop alongside the capital is Seville, and basically in a very similar way. As for my heirs, I see that Enrique got a very good trait, so I set expensive education here. The next buildings I construct are essentially two of whatever gives me the most income. Usually in Castile at the start, these are buildings related to better textiles. Yes, I built those in Seville as well, but in Seville it's also worth building jewelry. During the first parliament, I do a few things. I change the administrative law to the one that increases development. And if the event for war with Morocco hasn't triggered, then I push for claims on Granada. Seriously, I got that event right after. My luck. I could have farmed taxes. At the same time, I also started creating a casus belli to destroy an enemy. And yes, I did make another mistake here. You get that casus belli when a given country perceives you as a rival, not when you set them as a rival. A small difference, but still a difference. But even so, if you set someone as a rival, you increase the chance that they will see you as a threat. Now I also start developing the silver mines, because in both cities I'm already lacking burghers. My advisor has also maxed out legitimacy, so now he will start increasing development in the capital. Development, I must admit, something I didn't know before, is a stat that increases goods consumption. Of course, there's nothing mentioned about it here. Only when you go into population, look at any population and find the needs modifiers, you can immediately see that the higher the development, the greater the consumption. And this region has a ton of population, especially in the capital. So by increasing development, you increase your income. When the casus belli on Navarre is about to be ready, I start preparing a spy network on the Kingdom of Aragon. And creating a reason for war basically leads me to the next step, my first conquest, which I can afford much earlier now, because I'm already earning quite well. Where I begin by declaring war on the Kingdom of Navarre. In this case, I have to admit I'm incredibly lucky, because they didn't manage to secure any significant alliances. And right after that, I attack Granada using the parliamentary casus belli. But why didn't you use the threaten war option, since you're a great power? Short answer, I'm an idiot and I completely forgot about it. Anyway, 2 quick wars at once, his last words. And to keep up with everything now, I won't lie, I'll adjust the game speed. My first objective is to destroy the enemy army as quickly as possible. On the southern front, I have to be more careful, because I'm fighting Sunni countries and they can enslave my population, so I try to crush their armies as fast as possible. In the meantime, I remember to keep constructing buildings even though I dropped below 550 gold. I'm still hoping that a certain rare event will trigger. Meanwhile, the year 1342 arrives, which means choosing the first ideas, no changes, administrative ideas. Portugal has joined the war, and that's probably the end of the quick war. But fortunately, I left that one fort on the border with Portugal exactly for situations like this. And while the Portuguese were sieging my fort and my armies were dying in Navarre, it happened. The event I was waiting for triggered. 300 gold for an incredibly large amount of development points. For 10 years, for the capital. To sum up, this epic development event only occurs when your ruler has the architectural visionary trait and you have 12 times your annual income in the treasury. Previously, I needed around 550 gold for this, and this event happens only once per country. And why don't I want these development points in Seville? Because around 1350, a negative earthquake event occurs there, which reduces development. And overall, there's much more population in this location than in Seville. And look at this, I'm now getting almost 1/10 of development every month. That's far more than in any other location in the entire country. And basically now, since this development event has triggered, I can finally spend all the money I have. And essentially everywhere except the capital and Seville, I'll be spending money on building markets. But let's get back to the war, because Morocco has finally started landing its small armies, and now I need to hunt them down and destroy them. In the case of Navarre, I avoid fighting Portugal for now and focus on Navarre itself, although Portugal doesn't seem to avoid fighting me, since it occasionally engages me anyway. Oh, and I forgot, I need to win one naval battle with Morocco to gain the admiral trait, because it will influence naval values, and once I destroy the armies of my enemies in both wars, I basically move on to sieging. I end the first war with Portugal by deleting all of its forts and taking a lot of money, then I conquer all of Navarre for myself. I quickly occupy all of Granada. And now I'll be transporting most of my army to Morocco, where first I want to capture those 2 forts, while the remaining smaller armies move across the land to take regional capitals, allowing me to progress quickly with occupation. Thanks to this, Morocco very quickly gives up all of its Iberian territories, and I establish a foothold for further conquests. And money, I annex Granada entirely for myself. And now I have to deal with the conquered lands. I create the historical vassal Navarre also as my subject. As for territories of different religions, in those 3 provinces I create a separate vassal in each of them, and I do the same in Morocco, which ultimately looks like this. For each of these non-believers, I first enforce a change of religion. I do this because every subject state you release has 2 advisors in its cabinet. That's simply the base number. So the first advisor will handle integrating the acquired province, and the second will convert its religion. Religious conversion is also usually faster, because most countries lean towards spirituality values. Or rather, they simply inherit your values. And yes, now these subject states become very disloyal, and I now have to spend a lot of money on diplomacy. Morocco has been pushed out of Iberia, a great success, and now I can move on to the next step, where I will show you the best location for a governor and a new capital. And these locations might surprise you. First, I move the capital to Seville. Only here do I use the income trick, just like when creating a new market. By reducing budget income to 0, I drastically lower the cost of this action. Essentially, I assign my values advisor to raise control in the Seville region as quickly as possible. In the meantime, I finally managed to gather 35 papal influence points, which allows me to immediately ask the Pope for a divorce. This should prevent my personal union with Portugal. After conquering Granada, I can finally afford to delete most of the forts in the south, which I did at the wrong moment because I got hit by a coalition war, but I don't worry about it. I gather my troops and prepare to destroy the enemy army. In a coalition war, the goal is simply to win battles. So I gather my entire army into one large force and attack much smaller Aragonese armies. Since this is a coalition war where I was attacked, I will settle only for money and war reparations. And in the meantime, I prepare for my own invasion of Aragon. Despite this war, I finally gathered enough gold to build a governor in the old capital. In my silver mines, I build bailiffs, then I build bridges, and I aim to maximize control in my silver mines. That's mainly why I moved the capital to Seville. If the capital had remained in the old location, and I had built the governor in Seville instead, I would have only reached about 75% control in Constantina, whereas now I have almost the maximum. Since the Black Death has appeared in the world, during the next parliament, I raise taxes and build as many hospitals as possible. And the Black Death strikes, so I introduce segregation of the infected and maximize communalism. After the plague, mainly in the south, I build settlements everywhere, because that greatly accelerates population growth. And now, while these things are being constructed, I attack Aragon, as well as Portugal, mainly so that my heir can also gain the admiral trait from participating in a naval battle. I first moved my army into Portugal because there isn't a single fort in that country, so the entire invasion went very quickly. Since I called Portugal into the war separately, the bonus for cheaper provinces also applies to them. And essentially, in one war I can conquer everything except the capital. Since France and Portugal are rivals, the French should receive less antagonism than other nearby countries. Portugal has shrunk quite a bit. Next, I destroyed the army of Aragon and the rest of its allies, so I split my forces and move on to sieging, although it turned out I had to prolong this war a bit, because I forgot to improve relations with England as well. And I really don't want that annoying country to join a coalition against me. Besides, surprisingly, England is doing quite well this time. And when I achieved a stunning victory in this war, this happened. An earthquake in Seville. This event happens in every campaign for me, and I think it's unavoidable. And it's worth paying extra to mitigate the damage, because otherwise Seville's status will drop from a city to a town. Right after that, I end the war with Aragon, where I basically conquer 2/3 of the country. And now I notice that France does not have Portugal or Aragon set as rivals, which is rare. So unfortunately, these conquests are quite risky because France might join a coalition against me. Luckily, it's still a bit short on points, because for a country to join a coalition, it needs 50 antagonism points here. However, quite a few Italian and German countries are already appearing on the list, so now I will improve relations with them. In the newly conquered Aragonese territories, I release vassals and fiefdoms, roughly half and half. Usually I give the more populated areas to fiefdoms because they are more loyal that way. For me, the most important thing right now is to create a kind of cut-off line separating the coast from the rest of Castile. And unfortunately, this means I now need to maintain very high diplomatic expenses, which is basically throwing money down the drain. Now Portugal. And here I do exactly the same, splitting the territory half and half between vassals and fiefdoms. But honestly, after conquering almost all of Iberia in basically one war, I didn't gain much antagonism. Especially from a country that actually matters, France, because the rest don't really concern me. And with France I can still reduce antagonism further. And essentially, after conquering almost all of Iberia, I move on to the next step, where I'll focus on stabilizing the country and managing vassals. For the next 10 to 20 years, I will operate on 3 fronts. I will aim to maximize peasant freedom, that means granting the appropriate privileges, and changing laws, so that the free subjects' value reaches the highest possible level. At this point, naval values should also be above 50%. As for vassals, I improve relations with them, focusing first on those vassals from Granada. I don't know if this is some rule or a mechanic, but I've noticed that if I manage to reach at least 200 positive relations with a subject state, then even if it isn't particularly loyal, it does not join or create independence movements. Has anyone found information about this? If so, let me know in the comments. The next step regarding all these conquered vassals is to wait until they integrate their locations. Only then will I change their culture to mine, because one advisor slot will free up. In the case of all the remaining subject states, for now I change their cultures very carefully and selectively. Because look, the Valencian independence movement has already been formed. There's quite a high risk that any country with which I have high antagonism, or that is my disloyal vassal, will soon join that movement. And fighting all these new vassals would actually be quite difficult. This is because when playing with free subjects, you have very few levies. When you max out this value, you can have up to a quarter fewer of them. Although in this era, I can already improve this situation by adopting a government reform that increases levies, which I will do. For comparison, when I played with serfdom, I had 34,000 levies at this stage, and that was without this government reform. So as soon as my diplomatic situation allows it, I will change cultures and then improve relations with individual vassals. The third front is the development of 2 urban centers, Seville and the old capital. Alright, I'm also developing that neighboring city. Most of the markets are already built, which affects throughput in acquiring the goods I actually need, not income. Because my income mainly comes from my 2 silver mines, which are already operating at full capacity, as well as many other profitable RGOs. If you look at this map, you can see which ones have been developed. And yes, 10 years later, over 100 gold net flows into my budget. I also have over 300 base stacks. All the values I cared about are already maxed out. Free subjects at 80%, communalism at maximum, and a strong shift toward naval orientation. Now I will focus further on increasing innovation and weakening the aristocracy. And even faster than I expected, I can now move on to the next step of my strategy, population growth, because that is currently lacking. I start by building granaries in my existing towns and cities, and right after that, I add some of those stone workshops. Because granaries require a lot of cut stone to function, but it's worth the cost, because fully upgraded granaries provide one of the highest boosts to population growth, and this effect applies to the entire province. So now, while the granaries are being built, as usual I go through all provinces and build at least 1 town in each of them. But first I need to ensure cheaper raw materials. Then there's also the issue of cheap food. The cheaper it is, the higher this modifier becomes, and with expensive food, it can even be negative. The easiest way to achieve cheap food is by developing all RGOs that have the highest food production values. And in those locations, you also build all peasant buildings that boost food production. If you solve the issue of expensive food at this stage, it will positively impact the entire rest of the playthrough, especially in Europe. In the meantime, I also finish dealing with Aragon and Portugal. Portugal disappears almost immediately, as does the Iberian part of Aragon. Along with the islands, I leave Sardinia for now. And now, honestly, I go through all those former Aragonese vassals and change their culture everywhere to Castilian. Returning to urbanization, I then proceed as usual, building churches, libraries, and finally granaries in each new town. So once I finish all these actions in Seville, I move on and do exactly the same in Burgos. But I have to admit, there's much less work there, because many towns already exist, and the population in some of them is already large enough that I can even aim to create several cities. And just when everything was going perfectly, construction booming and income skyrocketing, something strange happened. A woman is supposed to become the heir to the throne, which is odd because I have many male descendants, and ones who have inheritance rights. So I had no choice and had to change the succession system, of course, to the favorite son. This is extremely costly. However, this time I had access to a deceased ruler for quick canonization, and I did it literally at the last moment, because right after that my ruler dies and the heir ascends the throne, which means civil war. Since I finally have all institutions, I can start researching their first levels. However, the most important for me will be to unlock universities, noble laws and theaters, then move into better paper production, bureaucracy and accelerated urbanization. And this time, when the civil war breaks out, I won't support Enrique, but Americano. This ruler is just a beast, he has to rule. During a civil war, not all events are bad, some actually strengthen Castile. And unfortunately, my Castile is too strong, and because the civil war progress is low, I won't hide it, I'd prefer it to escalate faster. So in events, I'll choose the options that accelerate it. At this point, only 9 locations will rebel against me. I probably won't need an alliance with England, although I might have said that too soon, because France might support the rebels. France could be a problem since I have half their strength. But a civil war also means gaining good characters for the court. The civil war has broken out. Fortunately, France declared neutrality. I won't lie, that got pretty tense for a moment. And this rebellion is very small. I won't even handle it myself, I'll just send automation. Beautiful, that was very quick. And after the civil war itself, I move on to the next step, where my economy will skyrocket. And I'll unexpectedly find a great location for a naval governor. I start by integrating all of my vassals, who are located along the coast. Those from Aragon, Granada and Portugal. I introduce the third government reform. Finally, harbor administration, which gives me access to an additional governor. However, this time I don't choose to build it in Lisbon or Valencia. Instead, I build it here, on this small island, because it has an incredibly good harbor. But before I do that, there's a lot of work ahead. I also expand my modern navy, I build universities everywhere because I've just unlocked them. I annex my vassal, the Kingdom of Majorca, I think. And then I encourage migration to this island, and once I reach 30,000 citizens, I build a large city. Of course, creating this city took quite a while, so in the meantime I was doing another important thing. I was building roads. I treated my rivers as highways, from which I build branches of regular roads. I do this literally everywhere. Unfortunately, I have to do it myself, even though my burghers have the privilege to build roads. This time they were somehow very reluctant to do so. And bridges, let's not forget bridges. And once the city was established and I built the governor, I have to admit that the control spread from it quite effectively. All that was left was to create my modern crusader army. With one adjustment, I also added supply wagons to it. They are there only to increase its effectiveness by 2.5%. This is because units in this game are divided into 4 types: infantry, cavalry, artillery and support units. And actually the navy works exactly the same way. I somehow missed that before. And overall, I spent the following years expanding my economy, building the structures you can see on this list now. But the funniest thing is that in this campaign, I noticed that for about 30 years I haven't built a single RGO. Everything is being built by the estates, which gave me an economic base of over 1,700 gold. And nearly 500 gold of pure profit flows into my budget. And that's without any bonuses to increase taxes, because as you can see, parliament is still inactive. I also have to admit that when we compare free subjects and serfdom, the income turns out very similar, as does the tax base. However, there is a massive difference when it comes to the size of the levies. I also think that economically I would have done better with serfdom if I had applied the same control building strategy as with free subjects. And I think that my second episode, where I will be colonizing with this Castile, will be recorded from this campaign but using free subjects. And if you can't wait to see what colonization looks like in this game, I recommend this episode with England.